Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Bay Area Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Council, we'd like to welcome you to our first seminar of our 2013 series, Human Resources 101. Would everybody in attendance that's associated with the Small Business Council just raise your hand? Okay. The Small Business Council has been in existence for about a year now, and we're in charge of putting together a seminar series of value to the Chamber of Commerce members. We're very fortunate this morning to have a couple experts in human resources here to talk with us and educate us about that ever-changing field. Before we do that, we're fortunate enough to have this small, intimate setting. I'd like to just take a moment and go around the room. Each of us identify themselves and the company or organization we represent. My name is Lee Newton. I'm representing Newton Eye Care, and I'm also associated with the Small Business Council.
Ed Clements with the Bay City Schools Co-op Coordinator.
Lynn Zanotti, I'm with Financial Edge Community Credit Union, and I'm the branch manager.
Elena Rabidou, I'm from Cadmium Design Studios.
Micah Sells with Great Lakes Beer Recycling.
Erin Riley, Bay Area Housing.
Lori Ford with Little Spots Child Development Center.
Lana Bauer, Co-Pro with Mass Child Care and Family Resource Center.
Sherry Harmon, Gulm Insurance Restoration.
Sue Goddard, Dual Business Development Director.
Well, as you probably know, whether you own, operate, or have a management position in a small business, you are essentially a de facto human resources manager. Our special guests this morning are Jennifer Westfall, who is the employment supervisor at General Motors Saginaw Metal Casting Operations, and Tim Quinn, who's the director of Personnel and Employee Relations, County of Bay County. These individuals both have an extensive background in HR and either have served or are currently serving as president of the Valley Society for Human Resources Management. Would you please help me welcome our guests this morning?
Thank you very much. I think first thing to do is kind of talk about what we're going to cover here, and then Jennifer will spend a little bit more time on that. But we're kind of giving you both ends of the spectrum. In human resources, that's kind of how it works. You have people who give you problems and then people who earn you money. And what we want to try to do is in today's presentation is to talk about how do you avoid the people who give you problems, avoid the liability, and just give you one instance of that, and there'll be plenty more we can talk about. And then also the rest of the employees, the 90% or 95% of the employees are good employees. How do you make them more productive? Some of the things we're not going to cover, there's a whole lot of things. The Fair Labor Standards Act, we could spend an hour on that, on things like are your employees really contractors, when do you have to pay overtime, things like that. The Americans with Disabilities Act has an impact on all of us, even if we're below the threshold number. And then safety in the workplace. So there are a lot of things that we don't cover, but we want to try to give you a taste of both of those things. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
What we're going to do, we're going to start off with, I'm going to pass out a handout for everyone, and we're going to have two scenarios. First scenario we're going to talk about is we have a company, a fictitious company we had made up, and we're going to go through a sexual harassment case. So if you would take one of these and read through scenario one, well, I'll read through scenario one, and you can follow along, and then we can start a discussion along that. I'll just go ahead and start while we're passing them out. We have Ashley Jones, who's age 24. She's employed as a stockroom person at EchoMart, a national chain of retail stores specializing in yard and garden supplies. EchoMart has over 3,000 employees nationwide, but the satellite store Ashley works in only has 9 full-time employees. Ashley works full-time and has 5 years of service with EchoMart. She is attending a community college and hopes to have her nursing degree in about a year. Ashley works in the 20,000 square foot stockroom in the back of the store. There are 2 male stock persons assigned there as well. Jim Booth, age 30, and Sam Douglas, age 24. Sam is the hourly team leader and directs the activities of both Ashley and Jim. For as long as Ashley has worked there, she has been annoyed by the jokes, sexual innuendos, and posted jokes, calendars with partially clad women, off-color cartoons, but not to the point where she wanted to say anything about it. She marked it up to male immaturity and went about her business. Recently, however, Sam, who is engaged, has been hitting on Ashley, asking her to go out for beers afterward, commenting on her figure while doing elevator eyes and telling off-color, in fact, raunchy jokes. Ashley, who is in a committed relationship, gives Sam no encouragement. She politely declines his offer to go out and tells him repeatedly that she is not interested. After about 3 months, Ashley notices that Sam is following her after she leaves work, or at least someone in a car like Sam's is following her. She starts to find post-it notes, unsigned, printed block letters, commenting on how beautiful she is and how exciting her body is on her locker. Then she goes to the store manager's office and tells her what has been occurring, but asks her not to do anything at this point, and that she just wants to make her aware of the situation. Then the store manager agrees not to do or say anything to anyone, but pledges to keep her eyes open. Sam's activities continue to escalate, and it begins to affect Ashley's health. She has trouble sleeping and is frequently nauseated. She starts to miss work 1 or 2 days a week, and the store manager counsels her about the absenteeism, but neither Ashley or the manager bring up Sam's actions. Eventually, she's given a written discipline for a week off without pay for excessive absenteeism. Before the week of disciplinary layoff is up, Ashley retains an attorney who promptly files suit in the state court claiming constructive discharge. She does not report to work at the end of the disciplinary layoff. The suit asks for damages in excess of $1 million for sexual assault, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Both EchoMart and Sam are named as defendants. Now let's go to the following activity and ask some questions. But let's look at some of the defenses here that we have from the EchoMart. Ashley did not properly report the incidents because she asked the store not to do or say anything. This is on the back page. The personnel policy handbook that she was given when she started to work that employees must file a written complaint with their supervisor or HR director. There was no evidence that sexual harassment occurred. EchoMart did not condone any sexual harassment. She was not discharged. She quit. She worked in the back area of the plant, so her employer could not know what was going on unless she made a written complaint. Or 6, she should have brought up the reasons for her absence during the disciplinary interview. Now let's look at the activity. Do you think she had a legitimate cause of action against them?
Nothing
Yes,
more the
she
employer
does.
than the employee.
More than employer than employee?
I would say both. But
I would think
Well,
that
the
too.
employer is more vicariously liable for the actions of the employee.
Why do you, okay, that's a good point, let's hang on to it, there's another question like that, but, why do you say she had a legitimate cause of action against Sam if she didn't follow the policy?
I would think,
Oh, go ahead.
I would think that is he following the directions of the company, and is he being, do they have personnel policies that say that you're not supposed to act like this?
Okay. Did they?
If you look on their defenses, it looks like
They had personal policy.
I think she did one, and she told him no.
And she did mention it, even though she said, please don't say anything. I think as employees still have that obligation
Which obligation?
to, whatever their policy says, to say something to Sam, or at least should have maybe told her she has to put it in writing.
Okay, what about when she went to the store manager? Does that change anything? If somebody comes to you and tells you, this is what's happening, but I don't want you to do anything about it, is that a defense for the employer? Why not?
They were made aware, regardless of the fact that she said not to do anything. I mean, they were still aware of the situation.
Okay, so they were aware of it, but yet she
what should the store manager have said when she said, I don't want anybody else to know about it? Is anything different, maybe?
Yeah, she should have said that was unacceptable, that they were going to act on it somehow.
Should
That's
we
what
purge
we
the
do.
policy?
Policy.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. Now, to jump to the second point, legitimate cause of action against Eco-Mart. You mentioned the word vicariously liable, which shows that you've heard of that before. What does that mean?
Well, an employer can't claim the whole defense is basically claiming ignorance. They were put on notice once. An employer is responsible for everything that the employees do, no matter if it's against the policy manual or not. They can't say, well, you violated company policy or this or that. They're still liable.
So is the employer always liable for the actions of all of its employees?
I would say yes.
Everybody agree?
Yes.
Is that wrong?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. I mean, I think I might qualify that a little bit, but there is a principle in law that the and it goes way back, because what it literally translates to is the master is responsible for the actions of the slave. So you can tell how old that goes, 5th century or so. And it's called respondent superior, is the principle in law. But there are some exceptions to that. And one of the exceptions is if it's outside the course of normal business. If somebody is doing something illegal or is completely off the reservation and has nothing to do with company business, then the employer may not be liable. Jennifer, anything to add to that particular part? Okay. So what are some of the exceptions in this case that where the employer might not have been liable?
If he was following her. It wasn't on the workplace.
Right.
He was doing it on his own.
I mean, if the employer is always responsible for the acts of its employees outside of an insurance policy, is there any protection from being sued?
You're supposed
I
to-
would,
Go ahead.
I would say that, you know, if they were gonna go with policy, the employer should have said, I won't say anything as long as you give me a written document stating that.
That's an interesting thought. What do you think about that, Jennifer?
No, you still have an obligation as the employer to represent something like that, even if they sign up. You still have that vicarious liability as the employer.
So is the employer completely out of luck with this?
Yes.
Well, we'll come back to that, I guess. What should the supervisor have done differently?
Follow policy. She needed something in writing so she could go forward with procedure.
Okay. And the facts don't really tell you what the policy said. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. It should say.
And the supervisor in this particular case, when the first words out of the employee's mouth were, hey, I don't want you to share this with anybody or keep it confidential, the supervisor at that point said, hey, you need to understand whatever you do tell me here in this office or what we discuss, I may be at a legal obligation to take this further. So stop the employee before they proceed the conversation. Then at that point, the employee has the information knowing that it could go up the management chain or whatever the command chain is there and take to a different level, that it will become known. And the employee can make the choice, okay, I'm going to leave your office, I'm not going to say anything to you about it, or let's sit down and talk.
But if there's any hint of what it's about, then you have an obligation to do what?
follow policy.
Yeah, and we'll do an investigation.
Do an investigation.
What is the responsibility of her, is her responsibility as an employee? When I read this, and if this guy is like following her, well, like, as an employee, what is her responsibility? I would think that I would want to go and say, you know, why are you following me? What are you doing? Or, you know, can I deck you? Basically, I mean.
Well, she told him no once.
Right.
She wasn't interested.
Right.
Leave her alone and pursued. So at this point, she felt threatened and felt uncomfortable. She took it to her supervisor. Her supervisor at that point should have conducted a full investigation and put a nix to it and helped her. This is certain. Now you say, you know, what's the obligation of an employee?
If you feel threatened or intimidated, you might feel a little uncomfortable going up to somebody that's following you after work. You don't know where it's going to take in this day and age.
So that's where she tried to enlist her supervisor's detail, and the supervisor had that vicarious liability, but they didn't take it to the next step. So that's where EchoMart was at fault.
Does the employee have an obligation to follow personnel policy and report it to the supervisor? Can they just skip that and go somewhere else? Flip a coin, what do you think?
I mean, they probably could, but it could cause problems for them if
backfire,
they're trying to
I think.
file suit, I suppose, because then EchoMart could claim that we were not aware of this problem.
Well, that's typically what employers do, because typically they're not. I mean, you don't go around advertising that you're sexually harassing somebody if you're an employee. So, I mean, it's here she is back stuck in this warehouse, 20,000 square foot warehouse with a couple other guys. You know, who knows what goes on back there? Most of the front office people probably are not back there and able to monitor it, right? But the answer to the question is yes, she can file in state court under the Elliott Larson Act, or she can file in federal court in what's called a Title VII Civil Rights Act. It's actually the Title VII of the Act, and that covers sexual harassment. So the employees don't have to follow that. So what's the advantage of having a personnel policy anyway, if they can go ahead and do that?
In hopes to take care of it before it gets there.
Yeah, because once it gets to court, you lose. Whether you win or you're not, you lose. I work for Bay County, and typically we'll spend, $30,000, $40,000 defending a suit that we win, but we lost $30,000 or $40,000, and that's not uncommon when I was a GM either. A lot of suits. So if you have a policy and everybody knows about it, if nothing else, maybe you can avoid that cost. Anything else your supervisor should have done differently?
She should have brought it up when she reprimanded her for being absent some weeks.
The supervisor should have brought that up.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else? That's a good point. Thank you. Should have told her stop, as Jennifer said. And then still, you've got some knowledge something isn't quite right, the duty to investigate. And then when people's behavior starts to change, suddenly it's not just out of the clear blue sky. Good employee going to a bad employee, there's something that's changed. So an obligation as a supervisor should kick in as well. What should you be thinking about? I mean, this happens a lot of times. It's divorce or bankruptcy or some personal problem with children. You've probably seen, and somebody who's been a good employee for 15 years all of a sudden starts missing time, coming in late, smelling of alcohol or whatever, some abnormal behavior. Something has changed.
As an employer, would you need to investigate further of why she's being sick or take time to talk to her? more about that?
I think the key would be just take time to talk to her, rather than be so quick as a supervisor to discipline her and fire her
Right.
for attendance issues. Take time to talk, find out what's going on. You have a responsibility as an employer to do that type of thing. Obviously, the change in behavior was prompting something. It wasn't typical of that employee. And I think too often employers tend to too quick. All right, she's got an attendance issue. Well, take it a step further and have that discussion. Maybe you can investigate from that point. It would have alleviated some of the liability in Echomark's case if conversation would have taken place.
I think of the cost that it's going to take to replace her now.
Yeah.
You know, if she was a good employee, now you're going to start over, investing all that time and energy and training trying to replace somebody, when you could have taken a more proactive approach and found out what might have been the problem.
And replacing a known with an unknown as well. You don't know what the person replacing is going to be.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk a little bit. Let's say you're going to have that kind of discussion with the employee. How would you go about it? Because there are traps there too. Well, how would you center that discussion?
I've actually had discussions like that with employees before.
Yeah, me too. We all have problems.
Sat down privately with them in my office and very kindly and in more of a friendly manner just saying, you know, can we talk? Obviously, you're having some issues and we're worried, and you know, we would just like to know if you want to discuss with us what is going on that's causing your change in behavior.
When you have those discussions, do you talk about what the changes in behavior are, whether they're late, not showing up at work?
Yeah.
And that's key. It's keeping the personal touch out of it and set to the expectations. This is what we expect, and we see that you're not following or meeting these expectations. So not getting into the personal side, but trying to attack it from a different angle.
Sometimes when you get into something personal, you find out information you really shouldn't know legally, and you don't want to know. So talk about, you know, been late 3 times in the past 30 days, and you were never late before. And so you kind of go through those facts, and then you get to the point that you talk about, you know, I don't want to know what's going on in your personal life, but we'll do what we can to help you and support you, but the behaviors have to change, so focus on the behaviors.
Yeah, you can't allow it to be an excuse necessarily, but I mean, we've run into that where you have to work through it, and you know, maybe we've offered to grant them some leave time if it's something that is very personal and they just can't seem to get over it and they're struggling at work. And I mean, we've kind of gone the extra mile to help accommodate their issues and what they need to do to clean it up, but you know, but that when you return, this is now what we're going to expect of you. Just kind of giving them a chance to collect themselves again.
So you mentioned the word accommodate. Does that cause any problems with other employees sometimes? And what do you say to them? You know, okay, we know you're having this problem, which you can't reveal.
Right.
But to other employees, and we're going to let you come in at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. Everybody else got to come in at 8 o'clock. Is that
we don't accommodate in that fashion. That's not what we've ever done. We don't really necessarily go outside of the policy or the guideline.
Okay.
I mean, we make it very clear to the employee that as much as we want to help you, this is your job. You still have to do your job.
Okay.
And if you need time away from that to regroup, that's fine. We can get that approved. But you understand that if you come to work, you have to follow the rules just like everybody else.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's a good lead on for our next scenario. Oh, we have some facts up here. Sumas Energy ordered to pay $8 million in sexual harassment lawsuit verdict. Retired Tuscola County judge named in sexual harassment suit. Mother's complaint of sexual harassment of daughter sparks federal investigation in Byron School District. So.
No, we just pulled these off MLive. These are just recent ones. This chart depicts the EEOC is the administrative arm for enforcing Title VII discrimination cases. And you can kind of see, don't pay attention to the red or the blue, but you can see that of the cases that are filed, most of them are on sexual harassment. That's the largest percentage, followed by race, which in 20 years back, race was higher in sexual, before Clarence Thomas, I guess. National origin, age discrimination is becoming more and more common, boomers, and disability since the Americans with Disabilities Act. But far and away, sexual harassment is the greatest. Well, what kind of damages can a plaintiff receive in a sexual harassment case?
Depends on the attorney.
Yeah.
And the case.
Yeah, and what the jury, your peers think. And so, in state court, it's unlimited. One of the last cases I was in when I was at GM was one in which the attorney was asking for $9 million. Well, we won, so he didn't get anything, but it's an unlimited, whatever you can get the jury to buy, and you've heard of some, I'm sure. You know, and your insurance carrier may not, if you had a $9 million verdict, that you might be on the hook for that as well, because your insurance probably doesn't go that high. In federal court, it's limited to actual damages plus up to $300,000 for a large company. So it's still, you know, lost wages, for example, and benefits, plus $300,000. So it's still a lot of money in punitive damages, plus attorney's fees. And one of the things about the EEOC is you get some of the best attorneys in the country at your disposal for free, and they don't care how much of your tax dollars they spend to prosecute a case. So it doesn't cost anything to file something with the EEOC in any of these categories. So best bet is to protect yourself that way.
Some takeaways from this scenario is let's talk about the difference between a hostile work environment and quid pro quo. In this situation, Sam was the supervisor or team leader over Ashley. So she could have been looking at a quid pro quo, oh, I gotta succumb to maybe what he's saying because he's my team leader. Having some issues there, you know, talking about going forward. What's the responsibility of an employee if they feel threatened or intimidated? If they don't do that, they might lose their job.
Do you know the difference between the two? Hostile work environment and quid pro quo? Quid pro quo means literally this for that. An exchange of sexual favors for some term or condition of employment. So that's normally a supervisor that would be hitting on an employee. Hostile work environment, what does that mean? It's completely different. It's the second prong of this rule. And you hear people using it all the time, but it really specifically applies to sexual harassment.
Somebody that's their peer sexually harassing.
Not necessarily so.
Not necessarily, but it could be you're creating the environment so hostile that they're feeling intimidated, where the Post-it notes on her locker or the things that she was experiencing at work, it was creating the environments. It's such a I'm trying to look for intimidating, threatening type environment for her.
That's why she was getting sick or something. When they said that she was nauseated.
Nauseated.
Right.
Hostile work environment doesn't apply to one individual. It's the whole keeping a clean shop concept.
So it could have been anybody that she was.
Could have been anybody, but do you start out staff meetings with an off-colored joke? Do you have calendars with scantily clad women hanging all over? Do you allow that kind of language? Do you have a policy that prohibits it? And the best defense, and going back to Lee's original comment, is the employer always liable? Not if you do all those things and you don't know about it. If you have a policy, everybody knows about it. What's the best way to have everybody know about it? Bring them in a room like this, tell them what it is, make them sign that they got a copy of it. And then you got a record of it, you can prove it. Don't allow shop talk, don't allow off-color calendars and jokes to be told. And keep track of what's going on. You're not going to insulate yourself from liability by sitting in the front office and not going out there because you don't want to know about it, which we'll get to in just a second.
I have a question. For the
Sure.
company, I would think they would have some type of security cameras where they would be able to watch. Is that legal? Huh? Is that
That's what I was
illegal?
thinking too.
I mean, I would think that they would have something back there that, especially in a warehouse type situation.
I mean, you do, but who's going to watch it?
Right, there was no investigation that was conducted in this
Right.
particular case.
Mhm.
When we conduct investigations, that's one of the first things we do at General Motors is we pull the security tapes.
Right.
So we take a look at matching up times, people coming and going, what situation may have taken place. And as part, but in this case, there was no investigation. But that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. But when you, just one more point on investigation, so you go and talk to the rest of the employees, can you tell them that you'll keep it confidential?
I don't think so.
No, you can tell them it'll be on a need-to-know basis, you know, you're not gonna put it on Facebook, what you find out. But the only thing you can really tell them is, we're gonna keep this investigation as internal as possible, but if it ends up in court, or if we have to take some action, people have the right to face their accusers. So, don't ever completely get them to rely on the fact that it's going to be confidential, because it never really can be. Private or public sector, yes.
Is there a time limit on how long a person has before they can file
Yes,
a sexual harassment suit?
yes. In federal court, it's 183 days from the occurrence. And if you miss that and file in state court, it's 3 years. But in state court, you might be responsible for your attorney's fees. Sometimes the court can grant attorney's fees, or an attorney can take it on a contingency basis. Kind of talk about vicarious liability means you're liable even if you're not there. And the standard seems to be in the courts that if you have a policy, if you run a clean shop, and if you do a proper and prompt investigation, then you may not be liable.
Take out of the equation that she didn't contact the supervisor. How would that have changed this scenario?
I don't know. You
I
tell me.
mean,
What do you
ultimately,
think?
they still could have been found liable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So again, if they had no knowledge of it, they still could have been liable.
Right.
Based on the law.
Yep. I think one of the bullets talks about that coming up. What's constructive discharge? Remember she quit? And Eagle Mark said, she quit. She didn't like it here. Not our problem. We're not even going to give her unemployment. Too bad. When you see constructive in the law, it means, well, not really, but we're going to say it was just to make the story come out right. And constructive discharge is a real Hail Mary pass for a plaintiff. I mean, quit and then sue and say you couldn't take it anymore it's a long shot. But there's a couple Supreme Court cases that say that's okay. If it's so ugly you can't stay, nobody's doing anything about it, you didn't have any choice but to quit, and you were really discharged.
Yeah, but if she didn't follow policy and go through the proper chains of command, how can they say that? I mean,
Because she doesn't have to. You want employees to think this is what you got to do, but really they don't have to say anything. They can go right to court. So that's why you want to have a policy that strongly encourages that.
And anytime you get a hint that there's something going on, maybe there's a change in the employee's behavior, that should prompt you as the management or the supervisor to conduct an investigation and see what's really going on, whether it's having that discussion with the employee and going from there. That's, the employer should know what's going on.
What's this phrase mean, known or should have known? We already talked about it a little bit.
Kind of like just what you were saying. I mean, as the employer, you need to keep your eyes open and be aware of what's going on in the surroundings, even if that's the job of your lowest supervisor on the floor, or whatever job that is, to keep an eye that, you know, things are going okay for everybody there.
And you can't build your defense on ignorance.
That's exactly right. And we've talked about this a little bit already. You know, in just a matter of policy, you give it to every new employee that comes in, and once every so often, whether that's a year or 2 years, you drag everybody in the conference room, go over, and, you know, nobody likes to see that policy. It makes everybody grumpy to have to listen to it again and have to sign for it, but it's one of the ways you can protect yourself.
And there's so many videos out there that you can order online, and workbooks for your staff, your employees, to go through, show a video, have a conference once a year. We try to update this and publish something once every year through our natural work routines. It's part of, we do safety talks on a weekly basis, and once a year we encompass sexual harassment and hostile work environment in with the safety talks. We have them sign off on a green card, we call it, that it was reviewed.
You can also find these things for free right on YouTube. There's some pretty good videos right on YouTube, and just play them. You don't have to pay for a video.
That leads us to Clean Shop. Again, talked a little bit about that.
But the leadership has to set the tone. That's really what it is. And if the leader doesn't set that tone, whatever the leader sets, whether it's good or bad, will echo through the organization. Now, another question is, do you, let's say you find out that an employee really did everything that, what was it, I forget his name, Sam did here. What's appropriate? Do you fire somebody that does that?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Well, the right response actually is whatever's appropriate under all the circumstances. If there's physical touching, discharge is always appropriate. But if you tell a dirty joke in a staff meeting and it's not directed towards anybody, maybe a letter of counseling. Maybe if you keep pestering someone for a date and they tell you no, and you've done it 3 times, and finally somebody comes up and talks to you about it, well, maybe that's a letter of counseling plus a couple days off. So you have to do what's appropriate.
Well, and you probably have a written policy that states what your steps are for.
It probably should say something like,
I
do
mean,
what's
that's,
appropriate.
I know we have one, I'm
circumstances.
assuming most people do.
It could include up into legal discharge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some kind of open-ended statement where
Sure.
you can.
And that's taking place during the work hours, right? Not like outside work hours.
Well, actually, most courts and arbitrators have taken the position that if it's directly related to work, for example, here he's following her home, then it's an extension of work, even if it's off company premises and off company hours.
So like Facebook conversations that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
outside of the work hour.
Get rid of your Facebook accounts. There's no good that comes from it. We were talking about that this morning. No good at all. From an HR standpoint, a lot of ways you can get in trouble as an employer just by looking at it. Kind of off the subject, but
Tim, at what point should a company have a handbook when they reach a threshold of 5, 10, 15?
a lot of state laws kick in or federal laws kick in at 10, like, and OSHA, for example, kicks in at 11. So I would say once you start getting into the laws, then you probably ought to have a handbook. But you have to be careful because you can go down to Staples and buy one and just hit the button. You'll include things. You got your employer of 30, but you include the FMLA in there because it's one of the options. Anything you put in a handbook has the same effect as law, even if they're not covered. So if you have an employer, if you're an employer of 10 people and you say, you know, you're covered under FMLA, that's just as if the law said you were. So you have to be very careful about just picking, choosing.
Thanks.
I don't know, anything to add to that, Jennifer?
Ready to move ahead?
Yeah, I guess so. Oh. Well, let's, this will be kind of our icebreaker into our second part. What do we see up there?
Looks like an X-ray.
Something you should mop up, right?
Feel free to share. What do you think?
Looks like a
cat
person
face.
here.
Could be the sky, could be the clouds.
It looks like a handprint. Looks like
Makes your
Frida.
head.
You're not seeing anything?
Anybody see a cow? Click the button.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
I think I was focusing too much on the black area.
That's the point of this.
That's the point.
That's the
In which case I may have seen a flying mouse, but.
On the side, it looks like teeth, that's why.
Wow, I would have never seen that in a
No.
million years.
Because what people look for is they look at this, right? Is this a body of water? You know, you look at the black and they're not defined by the white. So that's kind of the theme of our next segment is focusing on the white and the black.
Now let's continue on with scenario 2 in EchoMart here. EchoMart also employs 3 full-time employees in the garden showroom. Jacob has been with EchoMart for 2 years, Maggie for 5, and Sharon for 3.5. The garden manager noticed that several of the customers come in looking for Maggie or Jacob. Maggie and Jacob are becoming local experts on specific gardening tools and techniques. After several brief discussions with customers, the manager noticed that people come to EchoMart to purchase items based on Maggie or Jacob's recommendations. This knowledge prompted the manager to sit down with Maggie and Jacob separately to find out what they are doing differently than the other full-time or part-time showroom employees. The commonality in the responses included the enthusiasm for the job, knowledge, and bringing value to the job. However, Sharon has been with the store longer than Jacob, but she's not as strong in these type of traits. In fact, the manager noticed lately that Sharon is often late for work, tries to avoid helping customers, and frequently disappears from her showroom job duties. The manager has some concerns around Sharon's performance. He believes that she is an asset to EchoMart, and she has been with the store for over 3 years, but he does not understand her recent lack of enthusiasm for her job. So let's take a look here at our first activity. How should the manager proceed in addressing Sharon?
Kind of just like we were saying before, maybe approach her on, Sharon, I've noticed these things about your performance.
Okay.
Just wondering if you have something you want to share with me, or is there something going on that's causing these changes in your, in your behavior and performance.
Any other ideas?
It's easier, it seems, to address things like being late for work because that's more cut and dry than the idea that, by noticing you try to avoid helping the customers, how do you substantiate that? So it just seems like there's some things that are easier to document and substantiate than others in
Yeah.
this description.
It's a little difficult in a situation like that. The manager can say, I've noticed there's customers waiting, and you'll turn around and walk towards the stock room where you won't, you know, maybe point out some specific points that she is not doing that are parts of her job, that expectations. Anything else? Let's talk about some discussion that you may have with Sharon. First of all, designate a time and a place to meet is key. A lot of times, as manager, you may pull the employee aside out on the showroom floor. In this particular case, in front of other employees or customers, that can be pretty degrading. So have a time, say, hey, can you come to my office at 4 o'clock? Let's talk a little bit. State the behaviors that you've witnessed. Be specific, not personal. So, and listen to some reasoning and concerns, what Sharon has to say. Communicate the value that the employee brings to the store. Explain to her that, you know, you've been with us 3.5 years. You're a valued employee. We appreciate what's going on, the kinds of things you do, but you're short in some of these. You're late for work. You're not assisting customers, and you just don't seem as enthusiastic as you used to be. Communicate each performance issue and provide expectations. And I have here written form. As a manager, if you're going to sit down and have a performance discussion with one of your employees, it's very good to have those points written out ahead of time. Whether you want to do it in an Excel spreadsheet, that's personally what I choose to use, is you have your expectations out, and then you have columns of your discussions when those discussions take place, and you follow up on those expectations, whether you have a weekly discussion on them and you document and you go forward with that. And that's important, is to have those kinds of things documented.
I have a question for you guys. Just because this has just recently come to light where I work, but we've always done a lot of this, you know, meet with somebody who's struggling or we feel they're having some performance issues and we want to talk to them. We have just, over this past year, kind of been presented from our attorney that we should no longer meet alone with an employee, that it should never be one-on-one when you're discussing job performance or any other kind of issue that they're having at work, as a protection for ourselves. So now we've gone to 2 of us. We still keep it extremely friendly. It hasn't been a problem so far. The employees seem fine with it because of, you know, our demeanor and the way we're handling it. But there's always 2 of us now.
Yeah, and from an employee standpoint, that could be a little
It's intimidating, and what I feel, but
I don't know.
I just wondered what you guys thought of that. I don't.
Yeah.
We do that at my work because I'm the HR director, so the manager will bring in one of the guys from the field that he
Exactly.
wants to talk to, and I sit off quietly. They know that I'm there.
Do you take notes or anything about what's going on?
No,
at the
what we
meeting?
do is we have a disciplinary form
Okay.
that they write up. They give them all the bullets, and they say, okay, these are the
And that's what
things
you
that
do.
we want to talk to you about. The employee will sign it, their manager signs it, then it comes to me. And I basically am just a quiet, I don't say a word in this meeting. I just sit there.
And that's kind of how we handle it too. One of us usually does the talking, but right off the get-go, it's like, and we say to them, don't feel intimidated. You know, Brian will say, Lynn is just here, you know, as just someone witnessing what's going on today, no big deal.
Right, and we always do it on a positive, because we try to let them know that, you know, maybe the person that's disciplining them is who they have a problem with. And
Right.
you know what I'm saying? And so like we had in our last meeting, when the gentleman was being disciplined, you know, he had a problem with the one manager. So he looked to me and then just spoke his piece. So we said, okay, let's back down. Let's put everything that you have, you know, issues with on paper, and we'll investigate that. So we looked at it from not just the manager's perspective, but from the employee's perspective, so we could find where the root of the problem was, you know, between those 2.
So you think it's a good practice, though? That's how
I
you
think
get
it is.
Okay.
I think it is.
In this particular scenario, we're not going to the extent of discipline yet. We're just looking at like a performance improvement process of performance management. So that could be your lawyer's advice, I mean, are they talking when you're doing performance improvement, or are they talking when you're
Like even when I
disciplining?
want to just talk to somebody, like I noticed that, one of the girls is just having issues. And maybe it's starting to disrupt our work atmosphere because that happens a lot with women when they're upset about what's going on outside of work. They bring it to work and they don't mean to, maybe it's divorce going on or something even worse than that. And, and then all of a sudden you start to witness that, okay, I feel bad for this person, but it's starting to affect everybody around you. You cannot come to work and cry and tell everybody your story 18 times. It's not that we don't have a heart, it's that this is not the time or the place for it.
Right, and that's where you take the personality, the personal issues out of it, and you look at, these are expectations.
Right.
We expect you to work at time, or on time. Come to work every day, unless you
Right.
have some type of scheduled vacation. We expect that you help customers, if you see a customer wandering around the area, that you assist them in this
Right.
particular scenario, and go through those expectations and keep it focused on the behavior, and try to correct that behavior in a performance management type situation, and then document it and have follow-up discussions, and communicate with the employee. There's so many times that managers are afraid to actually talk to the employees or to ask the questions where they want to go. Maybe the employee's just having a bad day, or in this particular discussion, and I think this will lead me to a good follow-up, is in Sharon's case here, you have a manager that continues the meetings for 4 weeks. They have documentations, they talk about her performance. He sees an improvement in her job performance. And as a result of these meetings, the manager also learns that Sharon believes that she does not have the knowledge to do a good job, but she really enjoys gardening. So in this particular case, it's just a lack of confidence in her work, and that concerns the manager. So it isn't necessarily a discipline or a bad thing or something bad going on in her life. Maybe it's just something as simple that they just don't have the confidence. Here she's working side by side by 2-star employees that are known in the area as they're experts on gardening. In this situation, she feels a little, gosh, I've been here 3.5 years and I don't feel confident that I can do a good job. So if you discover that as a manager, maybe you can take that performance improvement to the next level. What would somebody do in this situation? What would you do?
Give additional training.
Would be a thought. What kind of ideas, as a small business owner or working in a small business, what kind of training would you do, or activities that you think would increase her confidence?
Have her role play, like have her, have like a fake customer come in and have her role play and give her tips on her spiel and build her confidence that way.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
She could shadow the people that know what they're talking about, maybe give her a book. I mean, if she works in, there must be tons of gardening books right there where she works. She could read one of those.
Right. Or maybe some involvement in a community activity, or there's maybe a community gardening group. It's just, the point of this scenario is just to kind of look at, as a manager, when you're talking to your employees and you want to improve their performance to take them to the next level so they feel engaged in their work, they feel enthusiastic, they want to come to work and do a good job, is taking that extra step one to know a little bit more about them, increase their confidence if it is a confidence situation like this, maybe get them more involved in activities in the community that they may feel that increase their knowledge. A local gardening group. Maybe your store could sponsor a local gardening group and Sharon heads it up, or she sits in there with Ashley and Jacob, or who's ever in our scenario here. But it's very good. Any other thoughts? Again, it's getting to creating that sense of purpose for employees. What are some day-to-day things you may experience or problems that you have with employees or performance type issues? Yeah.
Always texting on a cell phone. Drives me nuts.
Now, do you have any policy on that talks about?
No.
Maybe that's a place to start. No texting during working hours, only at breaks or lunches. Put the phone away. especially if you're a service industry. If I'm visiting a business and there's a sales clerk behind the counter texting, it's extremely frustrating. So let's just take that next step. Okay, you're sitting there and you notice this as the manager of the company. How are you going to approach that? You're going to list out expectations. We expect that you only text on your breaks and lunches. Please put the phone away. As a result of you texting, it's hurting our business because customers are being turned away or they're not coming back because they feel that you don't have that customer support. So again, open communication and explaining to them how it may be affecting the business in which they work. Because one, their job's important to them. They want to continue working there, I'm assuming. And it's also important to have a successful business because it keeps them employed. So it's a round robin. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody has anything else?
It's just funny because we have a policy on it and it still takes place. So, and we own child care centers, and it's pretty bad when my 7-year-old daughter comes home and tells me that, Miss So-and-so is on her phone again. So.
I had a staff walk off the job because I caught her on it after 3 times of talking to her about it, and I said, you need to put that away or I'm going to have to have you keep it in your purse. And she walked right off the job because I would not let her use her cell phone. Apparently you don't want
We're
her to.
just immature.
Yeah. And she was taking care of 2-year-olds.
And in that particular case, it's a safety issue.
Yes, that's safety.
You can't, as an employer, you can't tolerate that. There's
Right.
safety issues, there's customer issues, there's.
And we don't tolerate it, and she found out with her. And so did the rest of the people that were standing in the room because they saw her walk off. So they do at that point in time, do not text on your phone.
You have a break, you have lunch, do it during that time, but in the meantime, keep your phone away.
Yeah, we're in the process of redoing our employee manual because when I was going through it, I noticed that it just talked about cell phones and the use of cell phones, but there was not one word in there that said anything about texting.
Mm-hmm.
And we've recently had an employee that he's been written up twice in the last month for continuously texting. So now we're just putting it right in our policy that the cell phones are to be left like in a company vehicle. When you go into a place of business, that you're not allowed to even take your phone in there.
And not only the texting too, but posting to Facebook or tweeting, or people are constantly doing that.
We had to write it into our policy this past year. We tried taking the nice route that you guys look at. We would stress it in the staff meetings. Let's keep the cell phones put away, please. It looks inappropriate. We're paying you to be on our time, not your own time. And that didn't work. So, because we have a lot of young employees too, and that doesn't help. So we just wrote it into the policy that your cell phone cannot be in sight. You can use it on your break or out in the parking lot, on your lunch or whatever, but it cannot be at your workstation.
Kind of like what a teacher does at the beginning of the
It's
class.
awful.
All the kids drop their cell phones in a basket on her desk before the class even starts, just to run away.
Well, one of the things that, you bring up the texting about the cell phones, but in our business, it's very important that we have it. I am in constant contact with my clients through texting, and also with web design, we need to make sure that things are working on mobile devices.
Right.
So it's like, I'm like,
different situation.
Yeah,
It's
like
it's not affecting the safety, or it's not affecting your company's bottom line. Where in the case of the daycare, it's affecting the
Right.
safety of.
And we want our staff to have them out on the playground and in case of a lockdown situation, have a cell phone, available. Because if they go in a lockdown, they need to have availability to get a hold of somebody to help. But it's not for personal use.
Yeah.
We could do a whole session on social media. It's a very hot issue in the law right now.
I'm going to continue on with another activity that we got here. We talked about this already. Activity 2. Suggest developmental activities to increase knowledge or skill set. We talked about that. Now let's look at activity number 3. What should the manager do with a better employee like Jacob to keep him motivated, encourage him to stay and develop new skills?
Just praise them.
Reward him in some way.
Pat on the
Give them a
back.
raise.
Give him
Give him a raise.
responsibility.
Show me the money.
Offer additional training and certifications that can be tied to raises.
Excellent. Excellent.
Maybe ask him to mentor Sharon.
Great.
Great idea.
That's a great idea. you know, providing these new challenges, the recognition. There's a lot of things that you can do, the specialized training, and that'll keep those employees engaged and enthused and wanting to come to work. And if they're happy, the employer's happy. From a leader standpoint, this takes us into, you have a manager in the workplace. In this particular situation, activity 2 here, you have the manager who isn't acting just like a manager, they're also a leader because they're taking it to the next step to instill the confidence in Sharon and to help Jacob take him to that next level by providing these new challenges. And as a result of the small business owner, what does that affect? How does that affect your bottom line?
Very positive. Very positive.
So that'll lead us into some leadership type activities. John?
Thank you. Incidentally, we gave you a quiz here, and as you're sitting here, maybe you want to fill that in and give me the answers at the end. 70% of service industries' costs are tied up in wages and benefits. And so we talk about human resources, you should go on the balance sheet because that's one of the few things that you can use to impact your bottom line. For example, you can't just say, well, I'm not going to pay my light bill or I'm only going to pay half this month. I'm only going to pay half my taxes. Those are all kind of fixed costs, and the one variable cost is what you pay people. And so what Jennifer's been talking about is, if you really look at it, and this is effort, that there's some point here where if you fall below this line, you're going to get fired, right? Keep coming in late, you miss work, you don't turn in stuff that you're supposed to. Sooner or later, you're going to get fired. And so most people, employees, kind of tend to be, I don't want to get fired. I want to give a little bit extra, but maybe not all that much. So what we talked about here earlier is somebody who is here and falling below expectations, and for whatever reason, coming in late or in the first example, missing work. But everything that you get by engaging employees from here, from whatever this is, let's say it's 80% to 100, is a bonus to your bottom line. The additional effort over and above what it takes to keep you employed is all a bonus, and that adds to your bottom line. So what I really want to talk about now is a theory that was espoused by a guy named Ken Blanchard in a book called 1 Minute Manager. Many of you have read probably in the late 70s, early 80s, and it's a classic. And it says that it's all up to the manager, that these are two kinds of behavior, directive behavior and supportive behavior that a manager has. Directive means giving direction, support means coaching and that kind of thing. And all managerial behavior falls into these two categories. And so if you're supervising, you're evaluating, you're providing structure, you're providing organization, you set clear-cut goals and expectations. You show them how to do something. And then supportive behavior is more coaching, engaging in two-way conversation, involving the other person. It's more participative. But you're still explaining and evaluating. In either case, you're constantly evaluating. Now, if you put this on a matrix, could you pass those around? Yeah.
Both of them?
No, just that one, please. If you put it on a matrix, and I'm going to go over this. This is the model that Ken Blanchard developed. How many of you would say that you're more directive than supportive? How many would say you're more supportive than directive? Probably most people. But you probably have a little bit of both. And so if you put it on this quadrant that you see here, somewhere, put it for your own use, nobody else, this isn't part of the quiz, put an X. Do you think you're low supportive and high directive? This is low to high here, low to high here. Or do you think you are both? Or do you think you just pretty much are a laissez-faire manager and what happens, happens? Somewhere put an X in one of those quadrants for yourself. Because that's, what do you think your natural management style is? Tough, isn't it? Because everybody has a natural
No coffee
management
in
style.
I don't know where I am.
Well, I'll give you a clue. This is kind of where mine is, because
Only
there's a
have
test
one
that you can take to
employee.
determine it, and that's where I ended up, like it or not. Not as much direction, more support, and many people fall into that category. Well, what Blanchard did was, he looked at, said, you know, one style doesn't fit all, one size doesn't fit all, and so you need to be flexible and be able to apply all of it. Sometimes you need to be really directive. And sometimes you need to be really supportive, and sometimes you need to be both, sometimes you need to be neither. So the first one is figuring out what level your employee needs, diagnosis. And I'll get to this in just a second. But you have to assess and treat each employee according to his or her needs. And then be able to switch your styles. Not easy for me to be highly directive. It doesn't come to me naturally. And for some people, being highly supportive and, you know, pom-pom girls and bonfires and cheerleaders and that kind of stuff doesn't come easily to them. And then, what the third component of this is, you need to let your employee know, it's called partnering for performance, what you're doing and what kind of leadership style you're having. So let me just give you an example. The first one is, you get somebody, and this is a picture of new recruits in the service. Now, they're not, anybody who's ever been in the service knows it's not much of a democracy, right? I mean, you know, you guys think about march 10 miles or 20 miles today, right? He's not asking that question. Very directive. This is how you do it. This is what you don't do. And you don't say, you know, let's have a group hug at the end of my talk, right? It's not very supportive. Now, when you get a new group of people and you're starting a new assignment, let's say, or even a single person, just graduated from Michigan State, got a degree in accounting, comes to work for your firm, they don't need much support anyway, right? They're ready to go. Send me in, coach, I can do this, right? But what can they do? Not much, right? Fresh out of school, don't know how the real world works, don't know how the business works. But you don't need to give them much support, because why? They don't need it.
They're fresh.
They're fresh. What they need is a lot of direction. So you need to do these kinds of things. How's it really work around here? What are the standards? When can I go to lunch? How long is lunch? Do I have to wear a tie to work? When does this have to be done? They don't know these kinds of things. You didn't know these kinds of things when you first started your first job. What's the most important thing? If I was starting a new job, I'd want to know, what do you want me to do first? What do you want me to do the first 2 weeks I'm here? What do you want me to do the first month I'm here? What do you want me to do the first year I'm here? And lay all that out. Is that micromanaging? Yes, it is. That's exactly what people need at this point. They need information, unwritten rules. How do things really work around here? When this happens, I can't figure out what to do. What's the solution to it? Need a lot of quick feedback. Especially new millenniums need a lot of, they want a lot of feedback. The second stage is, you know, this is Tom Nizzle. Whether you're from state,
or whether you like Michigan State or not, Tom Izzo is a good embodiment of this because he is high support and high direction. You know, there's only one way to do it, and that's his way. He wants you to learn from his mistakes, or from their mistakes, but it's still not a democracy. Why? Because you get a bunch of kids from high school, they're at college for the first time, they don't know anything about living on their own, don't know anything about working with a team that's, you know, they might have been a star in high school, but now they're just, you know, one good player among many. And so they need a lot of direction, but a lot of support because they're getting discouraged. You move from stage 1 to stage 2 pretty quickly, right? If you're an employee. All that, well, it's great to be working here. What happens, that enthusiasm doesn't last as long as you'd like. So, you need directions and you also need support at this point. This is the kind of comments you get. I didn't want the stupid job in the first place, right? Why am I doing this? I went to school to do this, to run copies? Give me a break. No one really appreciates me here. I'm at the bottom of the ladder. Anybody ever feel like that? Some people never get out of that phase. A lot of people don't, right?
Sounds like a
I
co-op.
feel that way.
Yeah, I know. After 30 years, that's how I feel. So it's a tough stage to be in, it's a tough stage to get out. This is where you work the hardest if you're a manager, because you have to consciously provide direction, which may not come easy to you, and consciously provide support. And most people aren't good at either. You have to switch your styles up. Well, sooner or later, you start to, you know, you're not striking out every time at bat, you're getting a single every once in a while, and you start to move into another area of confidence. You're getting a little bit more confident, so you don't need quite as much direction. You don't need explanations and go out this door and the restroom's on the right every day kind of directions. But you still need high support. Why? Why do you think?
Keep people motivated.
Mm-hmm. Keep you motivated. Plus, you're still singles. You're not hitting them out of the park every time. You're starting to get some of it right. You don't screw up as much. You're starting to figure out how things really work around here. You're figuring out the politics of the organization. And again, this is what you need here is more support and ease off a little bit on the direction. How does that look different than the last one?
Giving them a little rope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit.
Setting them up.
Test them. Okay, I want you to try this project for me. This is a little bit different than your regular work, but could you do this? When they do something right, some praise doesn't hurt. How often do we forget to do that? You know, I'm pretty terrible at that myself. You know, catch somebody doing something right and praise them for it. Still need to remove some obstacles. People don't start on things or finish them because they don't quite know what to do or something's standing in the way and they don't want to ask for help. And then the last stage is, this is the person who, this is the supervisor, doesn't have to do much. Doesn't have to do much at this point. Because you've got a seasoned individual that's consistently receiving excellent results, is constantly on the ball, and you never have to worry about them. You can go on vacation, and you know that if something screws up, it's not going to be this person's fault. So, and I had a boss who was like this. He was in stage 4 all the time. You know, but it probably wasn't what some of us who worked for him needed at that point. But that's the ideal. Well, guess what? Most people kind of get stuck
in here or here. Stage 1 doesn't last very long, like the life of a mosquito before you become disillusioned. And so you're somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3, and then eventually you get to stage 4. Because somebody who is really an expert in the field, been around for 20 years, 25 years, can't stump them. You always go to them for answers. Is there anything you have to provide them as a manager? What do you think?
Motivation.
I think you still have to find ways to, I don't know.
Recognition.
Yeah, because they get stale otherwise. So there's a couple things you need to do. Give them some new assignments. You need to be more of a mentor and a colleague than a manager. Trust them with things, acknowledge your contributions. Maybe use them to teach new employees. But if you don't give them new challenges, they get disillusioned, and pretty soon, even though they're capable of doing it, they slide back. And they're doing this, where you're getting 100%, pretty soon they slide down to just above getting fired, but they're smart enough to know how not to get fired. So, putting it all in one piece of paper, Jennifer will pass this up as well. You start out here, where they need a lot of direction, not much support. Quickly going into a coaching mode. Disillusion, we're not getting it done. What can we do? So you need a lot of direction. Here's how you can fix this. Here's what I did to fix that. And then you get into, you back off on the direction and are more supporting. And then finally, you delegate some new tasks and responsibility to them to keep them challenged. Stuck? So dry.
Taking a look at this quote, I think this can help on summarizing what we talked about, leadership styles, manager, performance management. It's not the truths we don't know that most people in. It's the truths we know well but do not regularly practice. Whether it's effective communication, something as simple as talking to employees, providing expectations, providing that extra encouragement, that leadership style. And on your scenario, you have a leader's checklist. And just kind of take a look at that. And as leaders or managers in a business, how often do your managers or leaders do these things on a daily basis? Whether it's saying hello to their staff, or something as simple to provide that encouragement, the recognition, and to provide those new challenges, opportunities that will help create more of an engaged workforce, enthusiastic workforce. Kind of simple day-to-day things. So we thought we'd share that also with you guys.
Finally, if you have the quiz, we'll go over the answer to that if you haven't had an opportunity. Were these mostly true, do you think? Hostile work environment is a term that refers to a supervisor giving unwanted sexual attention to an employee. No, hostile work environment is creating a nasty workplace but not directed towards an individual. There's 2 times, remember? Quid pro quo, hostile work environment. Quid pro quo is a one-on-one. Hostile work environment is the whole place is nasty. Okay, so number 2, an employer cannot be held liable if it doesn't condone the actions of a supervisor who sexually harass somebody, providing the employer has a policy against it and restrain all employees.
False.
False. What else do you need? Need to enforce it. Just having a policy on the wall and training everybody once a year is not going to get you out of trouble. Got to run a clean shop. If an employee quits because she feels she has been sexually harassed, she cannot collect unemployment or successfully sue for damages.
False.
Employer is responsible for all the actions of its employees.
True.
Not all. Remember, I gave you some exceptions. You can, and the next one, all acts of sexual harassment, if proven, should result in discharging the offending employee. False. Again, it depends on the circumstances, and you can get into trouble if somebody is, you can say it's retaliation, you can say it's libel, and the person you discharge can countersue. So you have to make sure it's appropriate. Employees who are poor performers should be fired or disciplined. False. Most employees with most communications with employees should be in writing, so there's a good paper trail.
True.
They're gonna say all.
Most.
Not most
No,
communication.
I would say
all.
that most of the time you do your best if you do it before you get to writing, and you do it face to face, and you try to do it casually. Is why I would call that false. Yes, is there a need for a good paper trail? Yeah, you should always, even if you're having a casual discussion. Hey, I noticed you were late this morning. Is anything wrong? Well, I had a flat tire. You gotta write that down somewhere. But it doesn't necessarily have to go in a personnel file. It can be in your planner or whatever. Good performing employees who are well seasoned on the job should be left alone. Well, no, you still need to give praise and new challenges. Every manager has a natural leadership style which should be well honed and applied equally to all employees. False. And yet you say, well, you should treat employees equally. Yeah, if two people come in late, then you ought to treat that equally and talk to them both. But the leadership style depends on the maturity and competence level of the employee. And employees should stay away from discussions about employees' personal lives and stick to business.
True.
It's a tough one, but not always. One of the most effective managers I ever had would, when people were having troubles, he'd talk about some safe personal ground. Hey, I see your kid was, got 2 touchdowns in the game last Friday. You find something to open the conversation with rather than you were late today. And eventually, the employee would bring it up themselves. Very effective. Not everybody can do that. I'm not that good at that. Most people aren't. Okay. And then finally, okay, we'll go back to the original slide. So how many got them all right, everybody? Not so many? I mean, you can argue some of those either way, right? Right. So, we'll go back to our cow, that if you only look at the black and try to define everything by the black, you don't get the whole picture of the cow. So that's the thought for today. And of course the final thought. Any questions? Right on time too, Jennifer. Wow. Call either one of us if you have questions that pop up between us. We've seen quite a bit.